It's another Friday, and I will pick up where I left off last time. I was working my way through the stages of the family life cycle, stage three, families with young children. And in the right-hand column, I had it up on the screen. We were talking about what needs to be done in order to admit the child. And I got through most of that material, and I think I got through most of the material about Eriksonian theory, about trust versus mistrust, and what happens at the beginning of life in the individual life cycle. So I am going to move on today. Let me see where I want to go. I will once again try to do screen sharing and screw it up entirely. Okay, share. Oh my, I'm having fun here. There we go. You should have on your screen individual life cycle stages. Please correct me if you don't. Pause for a moment. I guess you do. All right, we're going to move on today to Erikson's second stage, autonomy versus shame and doubt. And this stage begins at about somewhere around 16 months of age and continues up until about 84 months of age. It extends over a long period of time. Oh, I'm sorry, 48 months of age, 24 months to 48 months, excuse me. I looked at the wrong thing. Uh, what are the major challenges that happen here? I will read from the Good Enough Parenting manual that I wrote because you'll get a sense of what the kid is going through. Quote, socialization into the rituals of the culture has to be undertaken in earnest. What is happening during this stage is the child is becoming a person. Language has already started to develop. The child has developed a will, and the child can get around on its own. It's walking by this time and even running exuberantly sometimes. And the Garden of Eden myth is in full swing. Up until now, the child has been very easy to take care of, and parents could give a lot of unconditional positive regard because the child was not capable of getting into any danger or into creating much difficulty, other than the difficulty of needing to be taken care of. With the beginnings of personhood and the pushing off against parental will, the getting into things, the moving around, the being able to break things, the being able to cause havoc. The child is forced the home to be child-proofed in many ways, so the child can't hurt himself or herself, and the child begins to need to learn lessons. Socialization into the rituals of the culture has to be undertaken in earnest. So here are some things that parents need to understand. Clear expectations need to be given to the child. No's are going to have to be said, and the shaping and encouraging of behavior that is approved of and is sustaining for everyone has to be encouraged. So my next sentence is reward and praise should be used as the primary motivational tool. We're in trouble if, as parents, we are punishing the children all the time. We are somehow not teaching, we're not shaping, we're not urging ways forward in ways that are encouraging. We are dealing with a child when the child has failed to do what's expected without sometimes even teaching the child what is need to be expected, and uh, punishments represent a failure on the part of parents, not as a failure on the part of the child. So it's very good to encourage, to praise, to take pleasure in when the child learns, and children want to learn. I think of dogs. Dogs want to learn too. Dogs are happy when they can please you. Children are happy when they can please you too. Next, children need to have, I should have written this differently. Children need to be allowed to have feelings of all kinds. As they encounter the world and interact with, they will go through a gamut of feeling states. They'll feel fear. They'll feel rivalry for an animal, rivalry for a sibling. They'll get angry out of frustration. They'll get disappointed. They will feel hurt, put upon. All kinds of feeling states will surge through them. Those feeling states are precious. There is no such thing as bad feelings. They need to be heard, and the right to have those feelings need to be normalized, appreciated, and validated. We must not try to turn off the having of certain feelings. No, you love your brother. You can't hate your brother. Why are you angry? No decent child gets angry when a brother acts up. Now, I added, however, since the culture does not permit unbridled expression of affect, inhibition, no, I wrote that wrong. Yes, the culture does not permit unbridled expression of affect. You can't just hit the kid when you're angry. You can't throw things when you're upset with mom. You can't break things when you're displeased with your progress through the house. Unbridled expression of affect cannot be permitted by the parents. So an inhibition must be built. The inhibition has to be at levels of action and not at levels of self-awareness or of verbal expression. The child has a right to be aware of his or her feelings, and the child has the right to express the content of his or her feelings in language if the language is not shaped to hurt. If the language is simply, I get so angry when you do that. Stop it. Don't do that to me. It hurts my feelings when you do that. All of that is quite permissible. It's actually where things should be channeled. The child's feeling state should be channeled away from destructive actions and into expressions. And that is the pleasant feeling states too. I really like it when, or I'm so happy because. Everything should be expressed, and it should be expressed in self awareness. The child should express it to him or herself, and it should be expressed in verbal expressions to other people. There are four harm engendering parental lapses on the part of parents as they're helping the child through this era too, which ought to be avoided. These are, and I've already hinted at one, over suppression of affective life, trying to get the child to tune down or get rid of some of the feeling states. Two, an unwillingness to empathize with and to validate the child's right to those emotional reactions. Three, a failure to set maturationally appropriate norms, limits, or expectations. There's so much to be learned during this era, all the way from table manners, don't use your fingers, use a knife and fork. Here, I have to teach you how to do that. So much to be learned. It's almost more than a college curriculum. Don't hit the dog, don't pull the dog's tail, on and on and on. We're going into the restaurant now. Don't climb up on the back of the seat and start staring at the people on the other side. Sit quietly. I'll bring some things for you to crayon with, but don't annoy the other people in the restaurant. On and on and on. All within the first 4 years of life. A lot of learning has to go forward. Don't ask the child to learn certain things too early. I don't think a toddler can manage a knife and fork very well. Spoons are better. Fingers are still okay up until the time when they can try. They can try managing a knife and fork. Uh, don't try toilet train the child too early. You don't yell at a child at age 12 if they're not letting you know to take them to the bathroom to stand up to urinate. Uh, that ordinarily is not manageable. Girls seem to learn it earlier, but somewhere around 3 is reasonable to expect that they could do it and gain some kind of control over it, that the neural pathways are successfully in place, and you're not asking them to do something early. Uh, Finally, don't make the mistake of painful socialization tactics. Don't shame, don't humiliate, and don't use physical punishment. And certainly don't impose anything, any interference too early or with too much scolding, self esteem crushing, or other kinds of harshness. Those are the main things that are needed from an Ericksonian point of view by the people who are raising the child to get the child successfully through the stage that's labeled autonomy versus shame and doubt. If the parent has made too much of any of those four errors that I described, the child is going to come through the era showing signs of shame. They're going to be ashamed of themselves because they were taught that parts of themselves are unacceptable, and they will feel tentative and doubting because every time they've had to go forward and began to experiment with something new, there was too much interference, too much treating them like what they were doing was bad, and making them not feel good about themselves. They were not led graciously and welcomingly into additional competence, expanding competence of the variety of things that they had to learn. All right, I will stop with that at the moment. And let me see if I can get to, yes, my goodness, I'm not screwing up. How do you like that? I hope that in the middle of the screen is now epigenetic theory and some possible intervention paradigms. Please yell if it's not there.
Sadly, it's not. We still have
Yeah,
era of preparation.
and that's still there. Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, wait, I know what I didn't do. Okay. Stop sharing and start sharing again. There.
you got it.
I skipped a step. I didn't cancel out the previous share. All right, here we go. I think I need to make this smaller. That's one thing I need to do. There, that's better. All right, we are now looking at epigenetic theory and the document I created. This is again for therapists. What will be the signs in the consulting room that somebody has been mismanaged by the parenting figure of figures during stage 2? If the perturbations are reasonably mild, I think I'll read from my copy rather than trying to see it from the screen. Uh, you will find a client who has an overactive need to please because the learning of the rules of the culture and of the family were not carried out well. The trouble resulted. So there's a tentativeness about the person, an overactive need to please, difficulties making small decisions. Every decision was dangerous. The parents would oppose or not support the decision that was being made and scold and be harsh about it. So decision making is tinged with danger and fear, an unwillingness to self-disclose. Much of the much of the difficulty with the interior life was that the child was shamed or told certain feeling states, certain ideas were not to be validated. They were the wrong way to think, and the invalidation has led to an unwillingness to self-disclose, and the related thing, the keeping of many secrets. It isn't safe to be known because you get in trouble if you're fully known. You only let be known that which you think is going to be esteemed by the people you're letting it be known to. Now, if the interferences and failures of parenting during this era were more serious, then much more difficulty happens. Narcissistic and or grandiose character traits can be engendered. The child can overcompensate and get into a delusional state where he and she feels like he is the greatest or she is the greatest person ever, and that duties of homage are paid to them. This is how narcissistic personality disorders are created. The opposite is also true. The child who's been badly managed can grow up with terrible feelings of worthlessness, excessive health, self-handicapping, not wanting to take any kind of risk, not wanting to embrace any dangers of any kinds. Some eating disorders are laid down during this era because eating behaviors unfortunately often turn into a battlefield between parents and children. You're not eating everything on your plate. Here you have to eat more than this. Stop eating that. You're going to ruin your appetite for dinner later. Eating itself and the child's right to experiment and self regulate get interfered with. You're getting fat, or you're too skinny, or body shaping behaviors begin, and that will lead to trouble. The child will internalize the battle, and the child will engage in some kinds of eating disorders, trying to be in different kinds of control of his or her own life. Paraphilias, that's a nice word from psychoanalytic theory. Paraphilias are strange ways of expressing sexuality. Foot fetishes, uh, stroking women's silky garments, being aroused by putting on clothing from the other gender, cross dressing, smells, needing to sniff the smell of one's genitals. These are arousing. These are all sometimes part things that get woven a total experimentation during this era, and the parents respond with shock rather than with kindness and with some liberality manner of being sexual, and forward progress into the next stage where real sexuality begins to be experimented with and conceptualized much more fully doesn't take place. The child remains stuck in the second stage and grows into an adult who's stuck in the second stage. If you have clients struggling with these things, be sensitive to and inquire with what went on between about 2 months and 4 months of age, because I think you'll find there was problems with socialization and some difficulty in leading the child forward into further development. Impulsivity can set in. The child will not learn to self regulate, to be thoughtful about what he or she is doing, but will be impulse driven and impulse ridden because the parents are too. The child is impulsive and the child responds with their counter impulsivity. Everybody is impulsive in the family. Rage is a particular feeling state, masked rage expression. Rage is a particular feeling state that's supposed to be a no-no. Nobody's supposed to get angry with each other in the family, and people are supposed to be benign with strangers and gentle on the outside. The management of rage is very complicated in our culture. So we learn to, if we're not allowed even to have the feeling states, and to talk about that we learn to express our rage in deviant ways. Passive aggressive behavior, for instance, failing to carry out what we said we would do for somebody and saying screw you with the behavior of forgetfulness, turning against the self, cutting and stumbling and falling and hurting ourselves over and over again are characteristic of trouble during this age, as are the third one, affectlessness, and rigid character, seemingly becoming a person that's very schizoid and mechanical and without feelings at all. Here are the critical repair needs that the therapist has to understand and engage in. Clear goal setting. Do what the parents never did. You're unhappy with your life. Where would you like to arrive? What would improve your life? Tell me what would make your life better, more sustaining, more worth living for you? Can you identify where you'd like to arrive? You keep telling me how terrible things are. Please start imagining what would make it better. And we will try and make a plan together about what behaviors you can begin to engage in and learn from that will lead you from where you are now, at least in the beginning of the direction of where you'd like to arrive. That you validate as a therapist over and over again the essential goodness of the client. Give them empathy for how they were raised and tell them you believe they're capable of being really wonderful human beings and being able to learn being able to master the learning of what would be a good life for them. They have the capacity in them, and you're going to help them to get from here to there. That's right. Communicate your belief and the possibilities of them. And for those who are frozen because they're so frightened of making mistakes, you're going to have to help them to learn to contain their perfectionism. And I will tell my favorite story that I often use the anthropological realities of the carpet weavers in the mountains that start in the Caucasus and go all the way through the Himalayan range and on into the range that separates northern China uh, I forgot what the name of the neighboring territory is north of China, from outer Mongolia to Tibet to what's on the other side of that, through Afghanistan and on over into wherever was the last Chinese emperor. I've forgotten. All right, I'll do without it. Mongolia, there we are. It came to me. All along there are mountains through all that territory, some of them very high and some of them just high. And then there are foothill towns and villages that are 1,000 to 2,000 feet up the mountainside. And in those villages and towns in the foothills, sheep are raised everywhere, from the Caucasus all the way through to the Pacific Ocean in Siberia. And in those mountains, the sheep herders shear the sheep and they weave rugs. That's part of what they trade with the outside world with, the rugs they make from the sheep. And the rugs all have different patterns based upon the ethnicity of where we are. The favored patterns are quite different. And some of the people weaving the rugs are atheists. Some of them are Roman Catholics. Some of them are Eastern Catholics. Some of them are Muslim. And some of them are Buddhists. And some of them are over in outer Mongolia. I think there is another tradition there that I don't know about. The Uyghurs. Oh no, the Uyghurs are Mongolian. I forgot. There's at least one other religious caste. Oh, I forgot the Buddhists, of course, across the north of India. There are Buddhists that weave rugs also. All of the rug weavers, however, share a certain mystical belief. They share the belief that they are not to make rugs perfectly. Every culture believes that a few wrong colored threads should be purposely put into the rugs by the rug weavers because it is tempting fate. It is tempting the spirit world. It is tempting God. It is tempting whatever you believe in to be arrogant enough to try and dare to make something perfect. Human beings are imperfect and their product should be imperfect. And that is the right and correct relationship between the present world and the spirit world or the world of the hereafter. So the very attempt of the person that tries to be perfect is the wrong way to proceed. There are sometimes if students are so frightened and freeze on exams, I encourage them to try and get the courage up to put one purposely wrong answer in their exam and see if the spirits come in the window and strike them dead with an arrow bolt or not. Purposely make mistakes occasionally in something they're doing. Start writing something, tear it up, and start again. Experiment with failure. Experiment with less than perfect. Experiment with writing something you know is crap and just write it and turn it in anyhow. Do not give in to your perfectionism because it's going to freeze you and prevent you from moving forward at all. Uh, all right. So I've already started talking about some things that the therapist needs to do. Let me back up and take that list up as a whole. Please apologize for making empathic breaks. You are going to fail the client sometimes, just as their parents did. You're going to misunderstand them. You're going to be preoccupied and not hear them well and forget them. You're going to forget to return phone calls. You're not perfect. Do what their parents never did. Apologize. Tell them you understand why they're disappointed in you, and you'll try to do better. Tell them what you've learned from the empathic break, and pick up again and see if they'll forgive you and allow you to move on. When you're doing the goal setting with them and trying to figure out where they would like to arrive, and what kinds of destinies would help their life to start feeling better, think of small next steps that you can do. What would be the beginnings of moving in that direction? You're tired, tired, and you're tired of having a parent that tells them how they should feel. Begin to protest. Tell the parent it feels bad. You're entitled to your feelings. Start advocating for your own right to have feelings. Maybe if you could take the first next step, just protest about it. Don't just accept that they're right and you're wrong. That would begin to help your life. Always find some time to do what their parents never did. Name what is valuable about the client. When I have badly damaged clients, I find something to thank them for every session. That my life has been enriched because they're there for that session and they're providing me with a really noble challenge and something I hadn't thought of before has occurred to me because I'm interacting with them, and I'm very indebted to them for existing. Sometimes certain kinds of badly wounded clients will be very ambivalent about whether they should come in and see you anymore. They'll say to you, I don't think I'm getting anywhere, and I think I want to take a break. Don't try to talk them out of it. Don't give them reasons why they shouldn't. Uh, Try neither to capture them or to reject them. Tell them over and over again that they're certainly in charge of their own decision making. It's not up to you to decide. You're a resource. You're like something they're consulting, like a book they're reading, trying to figure out what parts of the book apply to their life and what wisdom they can get for you. And they'll know when it's time to fold the book up and put it back on the shelf. If they think they're not getting anywhere, then please help you identify what would be the signs that they're getting somewhere, because you're going to change what you're doing. You're going to help them to get where they're going to instruct you they need to get. And if you're not doing it yet, you're certainly willing to try to get them where they tell you you're going. Reframe what's going on and try to meet their request that they're not getting anywhere. Where is it that they want to get? And you'll help them with it. If they tell you they think they've gotten about as much as they can get out of therapy, so they're going to take a break from therapy, applaud them. Tell them that sounds wonderful. Could they sum up for you what it is they're going to take away? You hope you've had some lasting impact on them. And you'd like to hear what the good things are that they've accomplished. And they should brag about themselves. What's better about their life now than it used to be? And promise them that you're always going to be around. You're not planning on dying or retiring very soon. And if they decide there's further work or different work to be done, you would be happy to find a time for them again. If they go into rages, they are so untutored in how to manage their rage. Work with them on rage containment, and problem solving. They usually are very black and white people. They have a switch. Things are either right or things are wrong, and they start raging about what's wrong. And they can do that to you too. You're either right or wrong, and when you're wrong, they'll tell you off and let you know that. You have to teach them about gray rather than about black and white. You have to teach them that the world is very, very imperfect. They have a right to be angry if they don't get what they want, but raging and throwing tantrums and throwing away the possibilities of what's happening at that time is not going to get them anywhere. They have to put up with the grayness of things and learn to work with it. Could it be improved a little? Is it really hopeless? Is it all black and white? Is it a toggle switch that has gradations of light? Could they learn to turn it up a little so there's a little more light and a little less darkness? Could they turn it down if the light is too bright? Do they have to just rage and forget about it? That's not a very adaptive thing. They're going to get stuck there for the rest of their lives if they can't start managing the rage and start seeing the goodness in what's also terrible. Also, they have to, for those who are closed down and unwilling to talk, if they want to get into a better life, they're going to have to start taking a chance and taking things that they think only for themselves and start sharing it. And could they name one thing they've never told you about before? Could they take one of their secrets and educate you about it and test you and see what happens if they tell you that secret? Because maybe the naming of that secret can lead them to something better. All right, I'm going to pause and catch a breath because I am now racing through things. I thought we would be hung up and going through this material for the rest of my life, but I now see we're going to get through it again. And it is possible. Let me stop sharing and get something else up on the screen and see if I can. What do I have here? Nope, that's not what I want. I'm not going to get that up on the screen. I think I'm stuck for today, so I will go back and pick up Ericksonian theory again. That's where I'll go next. Oh, I forgot to log out. Now I have to log back in again. I skipped over the critical step again. Oh, it looks like it's not there. God damn it. Maybe it is. Maybe it's hidden. Yes, it's hidden. Ah, ha, ha, ha. Triumph. Is era preparation still there?
Yes.
Good. I can go on. Let's talk about Erikson's third stage, initiative versus guilt. Let's see, what am I looking for? This typically starts at around 36 months and lasts up until 84 months, until about 7 years of age. This is a time where, in addition to continuing to socialize all kinds of other behaviors, there is an upsurge of interest on the part of children and need for the parents to address gender roles. Children are now beginning to move out of a shift in their masturbatory action Usually during stage two, the child has discovered that simply putting a hand on his or her genitals at times of stress feels soothing and comforting in some way. And much as any kind of other autoerotic activity, thumb sucking, hair twirling, whatever, it is not unlikely that the child is at times putting his or her hands either underclothing or overclothing on the genitals as he or she is reading, preoccupied, troubled, whatever they're going through. It just feels somehow completing and nice to have a hand on his or her genitals. That seems to shift at around 36 months of age. During the third year of life, completion of the third year and the entry into the fourth year of life, child's often going out to preschool, is out in the community more. Things are happening, and the child is beginning to feel a different kind of almost premonitory, pleasurable feelings in the genital that are more than simply comfort. It is the beginnings of the germinal buds of sexual arousal and sexual excitement. And children are often noticing things. They'll notice pregnant women and they'll say, oh, that woman's fat, or she has something in her tummy, or she looks different. They'll notice pregnant animals, and they may start asking questions about where do babies come from? And you're supposed to say from the hospital. We got you from the No, I'm being silly right now. There is the beginning of sexual curiosity. They're also starting to discover that their bodies are different. Girls' bodies are different than boys' bodies. They either see somebody changing a baby and the baby's genitalia is different than theirs, or somebody pulls down clothing and gets naked for a second, and a desire to begin to know and to experiment with runs. Kids 4 or 5, 6 years of age, if you got a passel of them and they're left alone without any adults present, they're not at all unlikely to undress and want to start inspecting each other or even touching each other. Unfortunately, we live in a culture that's very frightened about sexuality going wild, and most parents get threatened or frightened during this era about the need to comment on or to share something about what is pregnancy and what is sexuality. So I've tried to write some advisories here in my document, which isn't up on the screen, but I can read from easily enough about what is good enough parenting during this era. I will repeat, the socialization of everything else has to go forward as it was. You teach behavior. We're going to go to a funeral. Aunt Sophie has died, and I think you're big enough to go to a funeral. It's a time where Aunt Sophie is no longer with us. She's gone off to another life somewhere, and her remains are going to be put in the ground because that's what we do when people are no longer here but have gone off to another different kind of life. It's okay if you share that myth in the beginning of the early living, but all the family and friends that she had are going to gather and say goodbye to her, and you're going to come. And it's time to be very, very quiet and still. It may be hard for you. Maybe you'll get bored. I don't know, but see if you can stand by me and I'll put my arm around you and you stay still. You prepare them for the challenge. Remember, we're going to the restaurant and you're going to eat with your knife and fork and put your napkin in your lap, and you're not going to bother the other people in the restaurant. If that's hard or difficult, maybe it's not a good night to go to the restaurant. We'll leave again, but I think you can do it. And I'm sure you can learn how to do this. It's what all of us have to learn to do as we get older and older. So you teach and you tell them in advance, now's the time we're going to do what I taught you about. Then you encourage them to do it. And then you praise them for having successfully learned a new skill. Oh, yes, that's where the knife and fork go when you set the table. Good, you got it right this time. I'm happy to show you again if you forget, but I believe you can learn how to do it. And I won't have to tell you over and over again. It will come naturally to you. That is the humane and wonderful way to raise children. Not, you stupid idiot, I told you 3 times how to fold a napkin and you're still not doing it right. So general socialization continues. But parents must respond sensitively to growing interest in sexuality, the riddle of procreation, and the beginnings of an enduring recourse to masturbation, now not to just comfort, but with an erotic overtone. The great overlap in human nature between males and females need to be expected, and parents should avoid locking children into rigid definitions of what a male or what a female is. When you're socializing the early arrivals of sexuality, you don't shame boys if they want to play with dolls or tell girls they're not allowed to pick up guns and shoot them. You allow fluidity and play. If somebody wants to see somebody dancing and wants to try to dance like the dancer on the television screen, you don't tell boys, only girls do that. You're going to be a boy. You're a real boy. And I'm going to teach you how to be a real boy. Let the gender fluidity and flow and curiosity flow. Sometimes we're not typically going to want to become the other gender, but in order to understand what the other gender is and does, sometimes we have to role play what it's like being the other gender to understand them fully. Play is a way of understanding for small children. It's not necessarily a role definition that they're arriving at. I do want to make a final comment about that. For a large number of children, though, they already know what the destination is for them. Typically, girls and boys start talking about growing up and getting married. They start saying, let's play house, you be the daddy and I'll be the mommy. And they know somehow already that that's what they want to do. There are another group that are in the interstices, as they're called. They're relatively unclear. I've had gay, lesbian, bisexual clients tell me that by age 4 or 5, they were thinking of what the destination was, who would be their partner. And for those who had a rigid role definition already, that was fine. They knew that they were gay, that they were different from the mainstream of the culture, and they were trying to deal with as early as 5 or 6 with the consequences of what did it mean to be different than so many of their peers. And that has to be accepted by parents too. The one thing that parents do need to do, unfortunately, about the early experimentations and early preoccupation with sexuality is to honor the cultural demand for circumspection and privacy with regard to erotic life. That must be taught. You have to warn children if they go to school and they start putting their hand inside their pants and rubbing themselves when they're upset in class, that's going to get them teased and get them in trouble. Unfortunately, our culture has norms about what behaviors are to be done in privacy and what behaviors are okay to share with other people. And you're going to help them to learn the difference because the world can be cruel and the world can mock and the world can scold and the world can interfere with and representatives of the world can shame. And you would like them not to be on the receiving end of bad treatment from other people. And I did write sexual orientation frequently coalesces during this era. Children will try out enactments of their sexual identity with each other and with the adults in their families. Oh, it's not unusual if dad is on a trip for a male son to say, Mom, can I get in bed with you tonight? Pretend to be dad. They will create the Oedipus and Electra dramas or the same sex dramas. They will tell a brother or sister, get in bed with me and let's pretend we're mommy and daddy. Serious wounding can ensue if the incest taboo is not observed and generational boundaries are not kept well in place. A woman should not say, "No, we're not going to play mommy and daddy in bed tonight. You can get in bed. Daddy's not here, but you're still my little boy, and you will have your own wife when you grow up. I'm never going to be your wife. I'm not even going to pretend to be your wife." Kids need that boundary. That's very comforting to them, even if they're pulling at the boundary. You two want to get in bed and play house? No, you're not going to do that. You're going to get in bed, but nobody's going to start getting undressed. I'm going to come in and check and make sure you don't. And that behavior is not going to go on in this house. Reasonable modesty and privacy must be the order of the day. Uh, we don't walk in on each other when we're using the bathroom. Bathrooms are private. If you need help in the bathroom, call out or come out again and ask for help. But if you're in the bathroom, I'm going to knock and ask if it's okay to come in. Cross generational nudity, finally, can cause later problems. It's okay probably to bathe and shower with a kid up until about 3 years of age, but on the other side of that, start being modest because everything is tinged with sexual overtones. If you take if you're a man and take your son into a shower with you, the child's head is not going to be much taller than your genitals, and your child will be staring at your genitals, comparing them with his genitals, wondering about how you use your genitals, why there's hair around yours, and beginning to advance forward into something the child is probably not ready yet to assimilate or deal with. And don't stir the premature stimulation of things that can be left until later. All right, I think I'm going to stop at that point. I poured out lots of material, lots of information. I'm very curious about it. Let me see, where the hell is my cursor? There it is. I'm going to stop screen share. Why will it not stop? Oh, because that's not the way you stop. There, I stopped screen sharing. Now I'm seeing here you all. Who would like to go first?
Arthur, in the last couple weeks or so in my practice, I've had actually in some ways it was one parent that I consulted with, and actually two parents that were divorced that I've met with, and I'm going to meet the child, and then there's someone else I know about where there's a child between the ages of 5 and 7.
Yes.
And these are, nice parents, good parents, but the child is really referred to as oppositional defiant disorder, dysregulated, non-compliant, tantruming, and in some ways it almost seems like it's kind of like out of the blue. It's not necessarily kind of a protest, but in some ways it's almost like an interesting phenomenon. And so I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Well, it seems to me, I need two things. It seems to me that the child has not successfully moved out of stage two, Erikson stage two, in a successful fashion. So I don't know what were the failures of good enough parenting during that era that left part of him trapped. He seems to tantrum periodically and be unable to negotiate something if there's a frustration with the parent, but simply says no and tantrums.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I'd
it's
like
just,
to I'd like to know what is the content of the behavior that's being objected to by the parents and they want to change.
yeah, I
You
think
have a concrete example of such behavior.
in I think in the one case, in some ways, it's like parents who are going through a very difficult divorce
Yes,
at the age of, I believe at the age of 3, when the child was 3, the child is now 7.
yes.
So I think that that's, certainly was kind of occurring at the
Well,
age of
they
2
may
or 3.
account for why the parent was tuned out and inattentive in ways the parent should have been more attentive to, and or they may have been terrible inconsistencies between the demands, child rearing practices in the two houses. If the child was going back and forth during that era, I think it would be worthwhile for you to hear more about what happened to the child back then and who was parenting how. But I'm
Hmm.
still coming back into the present. In the present, the child behaves in some ways that are problematic. I guess both parents agree that the child's behavior is problematic in these ways.
Well, in this one case, in some ways, that the father is kind of like much more vocal about kind of like the concern for oppositional, defiant behavior, where the mother sort of like takes it in terms of like, well, this is really not that much different than kind of like more normal type behavior.
Well, I still don't know what the child is protesting about, how the child is protesting, and what the father is doing in the face of the protest. Could you educate me about any of that?
Mm. The child may be protesting about rules, or about bedtime, or about the older brother, that sort of thing.
Okay, so the child would like something done about one of those things that the father's not agreeing to do.
Yeah.
Well, he has a right to protest. That's what
Hmm.
the first thing is the father has to make peace with. He's entitled to his longings and his feelings. Doesn't
Hmm.
mean they're all going to be granted, but he's not a bad person for expressing them.
Hmm.
You have to help the father with his parenting style. He sounds
Hmm.
like he wants to crush the child and have the child just shut up and just do what he's told, and the child's not going to do that.
Right. Right.
He can invite the child to tell me you dislike me at this moment because I'm telling you you have to do that. I am still in charge with you. Maybe, let's see, you're 5 now. You want to go to bed a half hour later. Maybe if you're on top of your game and you're pleasant to be with and everything's going well, maybe in 2 months I'll say, fine, I'm going to move your bed. You will get a later and later bedtime, but we'll work that out together. I'm not
Hmm.
going to do it just because you're telling me I have to do it because I don't have to do it. I'm in charge of you yet.
Hmm.
Gradually, when you get to be a teenager, you'll be in charge of more and more of you. We'll get there, but you're not there yet. Talk to the child with kindness and educate the child.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay.
Well, the father seems to want you to get the child to stop doing that.
Right. Right. Yeah.
He's not going to say, I'm glad the child isn't stopping doing that. I've often agreed with the younger one of my stepchildren that her older sister was a pain in the ass. I found her a pain in the ass frequently. She could be obnoxious, but I tell the younger one, you can't hit her and you can't start cursing at her. You're not allowed to do that. You can tell her she's a pain in the ass. I don't mind. You try and shape his expression of what he wants rather than tell him to stop not wanting the same thing as his father wants. He's
Hmm. Hmm.
entitled to be himself.
Well, I get to meet the child this week.
Oh, you haven't met the child.
Yeah.
I'm sure he'll be adorable and charming. That's what I'm predicting. And you can apologize to him and tell him you work with his father to make his father more gracious.
Yeah, I think a big part of parenting, I often advise parents to, they have many, many years, especially when the child's young, to just very kindly and consistently just talk and talk
Yes.
and
Thank you, Aaron.
talk
That's
and
wonderful.
talk until their eyes glaze over and they can't take your rational, calm conversation anymore. And then sometime around 12 or 13, they kind of think that way, if you're lucky.
Oh, we had a wonderful colleague. I love telling this story. we had a wonderful colleague in New York whose name was Chaim Ganat. And he wrote a column for parents. He wrote a parenting column in one of the New York newspapers. And he had a wonderful tactic for dealing with sibling rivalry. Uh, Here is the scenario. One of the two children comes running in and saying, I was playing with such and she took it away and she hit me when she took it away and said, that's mine. I'm hurting. She hurt me. And what you do is you say, oh, I'm sorry. Let me see. Something needs to be done about that. You go in, you talk to the older child. He said he was playing with such and you took it away and hit him. Is that right? Yes, I took it away and hit him. And then you turn to the first one. She's agreeing that she took it away and hit it. What do you want to say to her now? I don't like it when you do it. He's telling you that he doesn't like it when you take something away and hit him. Well, you tell him he's a little shit. Well, she says that you're a little shit. You just keep going back and forth, just repeating to each one what the other said. Eventually, they get bored and want to do something else. And they feel very touched. You've come in, you're managing it, you're taking over somehow, but you're not taking sides and you're not aligning with anybody and you're not forcing any solution on anybody.
Mhm.
You're just listening and reacting.
I like it. Yeah, I think that's a very effective way to witness what they're going through and kind of, gently model how you can kind of, have a conversation and work through it.
Yeah, you can model that it's okay. I understand that you feel that way.
Hmm.
You're
It's also
validating
good.
you're
It's also a good
validating the
time to
feelings,
remind.
but what?
Mhm.
I'm sorry. Go ahead,
Oh,
Eric.
no, no. I said it's also a good time to remind parents that when they're having discussions, that they're modeling for their kids how to talk about things.
Yes. Thank you for that one too. All right, it's time for me to say goodbye to you for today. We will skip next week. For those of you who are actually following this from week to week, this episode will be put up if you want to look at it in some detail. But then it's going to be more than a week until the next one does, because all of us are taking a vacation from each other next week. Bye.
See you
Okay,
guys.
bye-bye.